Good afternoon, soyez le bienvenu, guten Nachmittag, buongiorno. A very warm welcome to you all for our afternoon's discussion, Les rendez-vous du cinéma suisse. We will be talking in English this time, this year, and I'm very happy to welcome three very renowned critics from America. I'm starting with Peter de Bruges from Variety. Peter de Bruges has been working there in Variety for
a decade, basically.
A decade. Fantastic. And Variety is a trade paper that started in 1905, so it's been going for probably one of the oldest trade papers. And Variety also has several awards that they give out. They have a Critics' Choice. We'll be talking about that a little later. So thank you for being here, Peter. Then we have Boyd van Hooy, who is representing Hollywood Reporter as a freelance critic.
Yes.
Thank you for being here, Boyd. You also give courses in critique, so it'll be interesting to hear your approach on what is a critic, what does a critic do.
Okay.
And then we have the lovely Anne Thompson, who is here for IndieWire, but has worked for Variety, for Hollywood Reporter, for many, many, many magazines. And now she's enjoying the IndieWire and the freedom that she has there. Thank you very much for being here, Anne.
Thank you.
Being a critic for a trade paper, what does that exactly mean? Is there a difference to being a critic in a daily newspaper? How do you perceive films yourself, Anne?
Well, IndieWire is communicating to the trade and covering film festivals and doing reviews. Eric Cohn is our chief film critic, who's here in Locarno and has brought me here as well, and I thank him for that. But we also communicate to the film buff, the intelligent, smart movie buff. We're not interested in comic book movies, but in the context of the trade, all trades are saying a little bit more about how the film might play. What is the market for the film? That goes along with an aesthetic appreciation of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest difference is that you really need to be able to at least partially divorce your own taste from what you think the movie might do commercially, or in terms of like going to festivals and how other people might perceive the film. I mean, I think if you're writing for a regular consumer newspaper, you're talking directly to people that are buying tickets, but I mean, you can absolutely get away with just giving your opinion and not considering, but as a trade, you can't really do that.
I mean, there are kind of three kinds of criticism. We were talking about this to the IndieWire Critics Academy the other day. There's trade criticism, which is very specialized for the industry with this kind of consideration. There's what you're talking about, consumer criticism, which is the people for the daily papers. The trade critics are there to weigh in on a movie the instant it's born into the world.
They're the earliest reviews, and so it's very important that we can get out there ahead of the rest of the pack.
And that's why we go to festivals that have lots of world premieres to sort of like catch as many new films as possible. And the consumer critic may catch up with a movie. It's basically the Friday it opens in cinemas, which could be a year and a half later, depending on the movie.
But that also means that you can make or break a film?
It has a big impact.
It's hard to measure that, but yes, there is an impact. Certainly we can well, a good example would be the film Above and Below, which is apparently a film that it premiered at Rotterdam months...
In Tiger Award.
Right, in competition, in a very high-profile spot. Yeah. And it kind of languished without trade reviews for a couple months, and it later played at Hot Docs here in Switzerland, in Nyon. And the filmmaker has told me that the review that Variety ran of that film was perfectly timed to conversations he was having with potential distributors out of Hot Docs in a way that I'm delighted to know, because I don't always feel like my reviews do have this opportunity. I mean, for me, that's an incredible film and one that I would want to share with the world, and it helped sort of, the timing was just right. Mm-hmm. I mean, the film is the film, and the work speaks for itself, but sometimes the opportunity to be seen or to be considered in a way like that, it's like you can have an impact. Just to finish the thought, the third type of criticism, it's interesting to consider, is this sort of like aesthetic criticism. It's like once you've seen
more
a film,
academic.
Yeah, and it's interesting. This festival, Mark Parenson is to me the poster child of that kind of criticism of really getting intellectual and substantive with a movie, and talking about it as a piece of art. And this is a festival that's programmed by people who come at it from that approach. But that's totally different from those of us who are doing it for the newspaper your grandmother reads or the one that the agents read.
And the horrible reality, as we were confessing over lunch, is that we often are experiencing these festivals under duress. We have to write these things up very quickly because it's very competitive. Not so much here, but at a place like Cannes. And sometimes we're doing it on very, very little sleep. And it's not always fair to the films, honestly.
Yeah, it's knee-jerk criticism is kind of what I call it. I mean, it's that kind of like it's that
600-word knee-jerk criticism.
Well, there are people when you come out of a screening at Cannes who are there and they'll stick microphone in your face and ask you what your impression is. That's the real kind of like...
Or Twitter is the first onslaught.
But that said, I mean, the only difference is that instead of talking to those people, we're going straight back to our laptops and grinding out a review as quickly as we can. And you're coming up with your reaction as you write it. And it will change over the coming weeks.
It will.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Above and Below by Nicholas Steiner, that you chose to be part of the Variety Critic Choice. What is the Variety Critic Choice, and why did you choose it among 10 worldwide?
Right. Well, Variety Critics' Choice is something that we've been doing for almost 20 years at the Carlo Vivari Film Festival, and they have given us a program of 10 slots to represent usually young but European directors and films that they're not premieres, they're films that we've given positive reviews to around in the previous year on this circuit. And the idea is to sort of represent a mix of different countries and types of films. But so, I mean, the short answer is it's one of the 10 European films that really excited us. It's like and while I curate that now, it's been different people, Alyssa Simon, Derek Ellie before me, who curated it.
I used to do it.
But like part of the assignment was it's not my taste, it's like it's representative of the Variety team. So that is one that I loved and that I suggested, but every year, there are 10 films that went to Carlo Vivari that were, reviewed by different critics. Summer of Sangale. There are some really terrific films in that section, and there are some that I dislike, but that our critic, sort of supported. I won't name any names, but so anyway, Above and Below is a film that I'd seen a month earlier at Nyon, and just sort of sent me into orbit. I mean, it's like the kind of movie that it's the kind of experience that you go into looking for me, of like a fresh voice, a profound kind of experience. I mean, a really artistically and thematically exciting movie, and I'm delighted that in addition to being in a position to review it, Variety has this opportunity to share it with the world, and so that's why it was, sort of invited to screen in Carlo Vivari.
I was so glad to see this film. It's another film that organically you don't know where it's going and you're following it, but this is a discovery of a filmmaker with a great deal of skill and style. And he goes into these worlds of under the ground, people who live homelessly in Las Vegas, and he gives us a very in-depth portrait of 4 different groups, and you don't know where it's going to go, and you get to know them very well, and you get to care about them.
I mean, what is interesting about the film as well is that it is about people that live on the margins of society, but by extension, it's also about what does it say about us, the people that are not living off the grid. So I mean, it is about what it is about, and it is also what it's not. That's, to me, that is like sophisticated filmmaking in a way, and it's quite surprising that he's still so young. And his editor, who also edited Heimatland, Kaya Inan, they wrote. I'm assuming they wrote the film together in the sense that a documentary, is also much more editing dependent than a film with a screenplay, because you don't really have a screenplay to fall back on. And they did an amazing job. I mean, really, really amazing job.
Yeah, I mean, that editor is absolutely a talent to watch. It's Swiss, right?
Yes. Turkish Swiss. Mm-hmm.
Okay, but this movie is sort of like a masterwork of editing. Both Above and Below has these kind of chapters within it, but it also flows in between these stories in ways that are really surprising and organic and like
lyrical. There's some stunning, beautiful scenes in the film.
Yeah, I mean, the camera work too is really impressive.
I mean, I love ones that stand out. I love this sort of like sequence where ping pong balls feature into all of the, and you sense that this is a documentary, but it's not strictly adherent. It's actually openly breaking the kind of rules of documentary, where you're not allowed to interfere or to manipulate, and there's clearly a certain amount of that, but I don't think, I mean, the movie's is candid about it. It's not misrepresenting itself.
No,
there's a scene where this guy who lives out in the desert is a drummer. Clearly they've moved the drum kit up to this fabulous plateau against an enormous sunset, and there's fireworks going off. Now this isn't
Right.
going to happen organically, but I don't care.
Right. Or the same character spells out this sort of this message where he wants $7,000. He's either asking UFOs or the heavens or I don't know what, But and I mean, it's that's something that's something that happened. But you can tell by the fact that there's a crane ready to record, to sort of reveal that message, and just the way it's sort of done, that there's obviously a certain amount of coordination between Steiner, the director, and that incident, and I think it was sort of reenacted for the benefit of the camera, or maybe delayed and done for. But but it works. I mean, it's that is something that character did, and it's I mean, I really like the way that this movie kind of chooses to sort of to reject certain sort of rules or assumptions about documentary, and on every level, in the capturing and the editing and.
Well, I mean, it's not a reportage, which I think that's why it's interesting. It's not a TV report
verite
about people
aspect,
living, on the margins of society. It is a movie. It is cinema.
Yeah.
But in order to get that, I mean, yeah.
And it's enormously humanistic. I mean, it's on one hand, we're used to these kind of stories. It reminds me of a movie that I adore called Dark Days, that this guy Mark Singer did about the sort of mole people living on. Do you remember this movie? DJ Shadow did. It was shot in black and white. The people living in the subway tunnels it was 99 or 2000. It's a Sundance movie that to me is one of my all-time favorite documentaries. And there it's about, he follows his this community is sort of petitioning to get public housing and all this kind of stuff. Whereas this movie, it's actually kind of the opposite of that, where these people the characters, these people, it sounds pejorative, but I mean, his 5 characters have chosen to live off the grid, and there's that really philosophically interesting kind of question of why is that the right choice for them? It's it's not about getting them out.
He's also not judging them. There's one couple who are madly in love. They really care about each other, and they're so sweet and tender, and they're crack addicts.
They're obviously crack addicts, but it doesn't set that up.
He's not judging them, but they're also living in a very dangerous situation where if there's a big rainstorm, they're going to be flooded out, and they've almost lost their lives in this situation, and it happens again.
Yeah.
Now, Switzerland is quite famous for its documentary tradition, and you go to Nyon regularly and see big Swiss documentaries.
Regularly. This is the first time I've been, and I'm glad I went. Yeah,
but you'll be coming again.
I hope so. Yeah.
Good. So, what I want to say is that I think part of documentary becoming more than a reportage, being really documentary, being really cinema, is that you do a lot of research beforehand, so that you're there when you know this is going to happen. And I think this is what we can see here with Nicolas. He really did in-depth research. He's been living with the people, not judging them, just watching, observing, taking part. And they're so at ease with him as well. So he actually knows what's a lot of time, he knows where to put the camera so that this will happen. So I think that's one of the
It's how you can have those crane shots and what have you.
Exactly.
I mean, he told me that he had put together an hour-long or so segment just on Cindy and the Rick and Cindy or something.
Yeah.
Rick.
They were the crack addicts.
He had put together their chapter, and sort of to sort of help them get out of that situation, to find rehab, and he showed it to I mean, I don't want to overshare something that might be to be found elsewhere, but there was kind of a guardian angel who basically helped them get clean, and so independent of what we see as an audience, and he's not, for us as the audience, he's not trying to lecture on them or whatever, but he did play a role in helping them kind of have a happy ending to their story. They live in Galveston now, and they are clean, and it's it's kind of turned out for the better for them.
And they're movie stars.
If you will, it's the fact that movie's been acquired for U.S. distribution to me is the best news of the year, because it's a student graduation thesis film, and some of the choices that he makes artistically, including the running time, are not commercial choices. The movie, I think, runs longer than you would expect for it to, and yet I don't know where I would even begin to trim it. You know, there's no fat. It's all, you know, it's all gold. And I switched metaphors in the middle there, but
he even saves some of the most beautiful stuff for the very end of the movie.
There's that one shot, maybe the last shot of that duck in the Salton Sea that just sort of like disappears from view, and it's just like, you know, it's a gem, you know. Yeah.
One of the things you see that I was so moved by are the little things that give these people pleasure. And even if they're existing on a very basic level, they find beauty in their world.
Well, the movie shows that too by being beautiful. I mean, it's like you see them in their world, and there's a scene where someone's looking at the sunset, and they're just sort of describing that, and you can see how they might be content just having that and nothing else.
When he says that he's never missed a sunset, you know, you're just like, God, I can't remember the last time I watched one. You know, it's like like my priorities are all. I mean, the movie really, you know, does have this kind of potential to like re-examine your own, you know, your own choices. And the idea that a documentary can be beautiful is, to me, such a. I mean, he comes from a photography background, Steiner does, and and it really shows. I mean, he's not the DP, but obviously, you know, it's like there's that sort of great communion between him and his DP to kind of get this visual quality.
Well, I'm very happy that you're also excited with this new generation, because Aya's a first feature, Nicholas Steiner it's not his first, but it's
Second
nearly
feature,
his first. It's a school, it's finishing his master thesis. And of course, the 10 young directors of Heimatland. So you can see there's quite some fantastic talent coming up. Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for giving your impact onto your American views, or can I say that, on Swiss and European films. And I hope to see you next year again in Locarno. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for doing this. You did it beautifully.